First to South Korea, where it's been a momentous week with martial law declared and rescinded within hours, catching the country and the rest of the world by surprise. Our correspondent Kathleen Calderwood is in Seoul for us. Kathleen, can you talk us through first how the events from late Tuesday night unfolded?
Well, Girish, it really was a remarkable turn of events, and it all happened in the space of about 6 hours. So it began with the President Yoon Suk Yeol late on Tuesday night. He addressed the nation in a nationally televised statement saying that he was declaring martial law. He cited anti-state forces, pro-North Korean forces, but it's worth saying provided no evidence of any such conspiracy. Now, within minutes, within a few hours, there were people here outside the National Assembly. The military and the police were on the streets. There were remarkable images of inside the National Assembly of aides barricading the doors to stop, the threat of military coming in. And we saw the opposition lawmakers, 190 of them, convene here in an emergency session. So less than 3 hours after that declaration was first made, those 190 lawmakers out of the 300 that sit in the National Assembly voted to overturn or block that martial law declaration. Now, it wasn't lifted immediately. It was lifted a couple of hours later by the President and the Cabinet. So all in all, only about 6 hours of martial law here, but it's had reverberations ever since. This has been going on for days now. The pressure is mounting for the President to stand down, and the Parliament has started proceedings to impeach him.
And Kathleen, the days followed saw mostly peaceful mass demonstrations on the streets, and you were there. What did the protesters tell you?
So there's been protests here every night since this declaration happened. People here are extremely angry. They're extremely passionate. I think the thing about South Korea is it's obviously a very effective democracy, really, one of the most effective democracies, certainly in Asia, but it's also a really young democracy. So people here really care about the government working efficiently and effectively and the values of democracy being upheld. So we've seen people out every single night here in front of the National Assembly, also marching through Seoul, and they're really angry. They want to see the President stand down, or in the absence of that, because it does seem like he's holding out at the moment, in the absence of that, they're telling us that they want to put pressure on the ruling party to vote for that impeachment motion, because at the moment it won't pass unless at least a handful of the ruling party members, so the President's own colleagues, vote for him to be impeached. People say they're extremely unhappy with him. They have been for some time. He's been deeply unpopular for some time for a number of reasons, including a couple of scandals that his wife is involved in. So people really questioning his motivations. No one understands why he did this. And remarkably, there's been an absolute real lack of talk about North Korea, actually. It seems like no one's really bought into the idea that there was something involving North Korea on it. People here do feel that it was actions by him motivated by his own domestic issues politically. So we're expecting huge protests over the weekend and really people trying to ramp up that pressure on the President either to resign or his colleagues to vote to impeach him.
Okay, Kathleen Calderwood in Seoul, thanks very much. And a little later, we'll explain the history of martial law in South Korea, which was last declared 44 years ago. Now to some headlines. A court in Vietnam has upheld the death sentence for a real estate tycoon found guilty of embezzling nearly $12 billion. Trong My Lan was sentenced to death in April after being found to have secretly controlled one of Vietnam's largest banks, withdrawing loans and cash worth more than $44 billion. The judge has said there is no basis to reduce the death penalty, but under Vietnamese law, the 68-year-old could have a sentence commuted to life imprisonment, but only if she pays back at least 3/4 of the assets. That's around $9 billion. CycloneFengal has brought record rain to parts of southern India. After making landfall, the storm inundated large parts of India and Sri Lanka, killing at least 19 people. Fengal has caused widespread flooding, and some areas saw the heaviest single day of rainfall in 30 years. At least 7 were killed in a landslide in the state of Tamil Nadu. Meanwhile, Thailand and Malaysia have been hit by some of the worst flooding in decades. Across the two countries, dozens were killed, with fears it could rise further still. Hundreds of thousands of people have been impacted by the deluge, with some towns recording 6 months of rain in just 5 days.
A delicate rescue in Thailand's south. Rescuers scale a roof to carry this baby girl to safety. In a neighbouring province, the army carries people out one by one from the waist-deep water, using speedboats to manoeuvre through the flooded streets. Floods have engulfed this part of Thailand and northern Malaysia for a 5th consecutive day. The unusually heavy monsoon rains overwhelming rivers and submerging motorbikes. Locals desperately tried to save their belongings from ruin.
The water came very fast, around 4:30 in the morning, and we couldn't move our belongings in time.
We tried to save everything we could, but some things were just too heavy to move.
Across the border, a home in northern Malaysia is completely cut off by floodwaters. Officials say the rain could bring in the country's worst flooding in a decade. After a week of torrential rain, residents are using speedboats to get around submerged streets. The annual monsoon season, which starts in November, could last until March. Lauren Day, ABC News, Bangkok.
The streets of Islamabad have fallen quiet after last week's mass protests in support of Pakistan's former Prime Minister ImranKhan. He's been held in prison for over a year and is still facing dozens of charges ranging from corruption to terrorism. I spoke with his sister ImranKhan, who was released from prison in October on bail after she was arrested for leading a protest weeks earlier. She claims her brother has been tortured.
What they did to my brother Imran during that time was terrible. 2 weeks, you see, in a prison, it's for all prisoners. It's like the human rights violation of what they did to my brother was worse. In prison, it's like 12 hours in a cell and 12 hours outside. For ImranKhan, for 10 days, they did not let him out of his cell. There was no light, so he couldn't read. So that is torture. They tortured him. 3 weeks for the next 10 days, he was allowed out for maybe 1 hour. That's not how all other prisoners in jail, that's not their routine. So, the way they are trying to abuse him, to break him, he said, you can put me in prison for the rest of my life, but I will stand up for what I have fought for the past 30 years, is for the rule of law.
Since Myanmar's 2021 military coup, more than 145,000 people have sought refuge in nearby countries. That's according to the UN. Among refugees, injured rebel fighters cross into neighboring countries seeking medical help. Reporter ImranKhan went to India's northeastern state of Mizoram, which borders Myanmar, for this exclusive Asia Newsweek report. And while there, he spoke to injured rebel fighters to find out why they're motivated to return to the battlefield as soon as they can.
Before the junta took over, LaRunthara worked as a farmer. Like many civilians, he took up arms to fight against the military. He suffered a shot to his shoulder in battle. LaRunthara received medical help for the injury in a number of villages in Myanmar and India. He even flew to New Delhi for treatment, a trip paid by the organization he was fighting for. Since Myanmar's 2021 military coup, thousands of people have crossed the border into India, seeking refuge and medical aid in camps like this one. A report issued by the UN says more than 5,000 civilians have been killed by the military since the coup, and at least 27,000 people have been arrested. It's one of the many reasons why civilians are motivated to join rebel groups to fight against the military. MG Kong is 25 years old and has been living in Mizoram for 3 months. In 2021, he and his brother became rebel fighters for the People's Defense Force. Soon after, he was injured when landmines he was planting as booby traps exploded. Local hospitals say they're treating people for gunshot and blast wounds, among other cases. And while doctors here treat refugees too, they don't have a clear number of how many are coming through hospital doors.
Many of the refugees are not bringing their ID or something like that. Many of them are giving the address or the local address here. So you have to dig deep sometimes. And many of them are coming with the refugee status. But some of them, at least 30 to 40% of them are not telling us whether they are refugees or not.
As hospitals try to keep up, many injured rebels hope to one day fight again. Motivated to risk their lives once again in a country marred by ongoing fighting.
Authorities in Thailand want to reassure tourists that it is safe to drink alcohol there, as neighboring Laos investigates a string of deadly methanol poisonings. The tragic deaths of 6 international travelers has highlighted a long-standing problem in the region. And their Southeast Asia correspondent Lauren Day reports from Bangkok, tourists are not the only ones at risk.
For many, the process of distilling alcohol is an art form. From beginning to bottle, it's a delicate process, and if you get it wrong, the results can be deadly.
For first-time distillers, it is very highly likely that they might poison themselves. So I really recommend first-time distillers to study the theories and the scientific background first.
Tuichai Tongrod spent the weekend judging local spirits. He says there's a simple step distillers can take to minimise the risks.
You can just ditch about 300 millilitres. It's that tiny, but that's where the most of the risk stays.
His factory, 2.5 hours from Bangkok, is licensed and regularly has to send samples for testing. But not everyone follows the rules.
In August, 11 people died and dozens more were hospitalised here in Bangkok due to methanol poisoning. In that case, police believe it was unscrupulous operators deliberately adding the chemical to a batch of moonshine.
2 men were charged with murder over that incident, and Thai authorities have since cracked down.
We do checks and arrest people regularly, as well as doing some random testing.
The industry has been the focus of international attention after the deadly methanol poisonings in Laos that killed 6 tourists, including 2 Australians. Thailand's public health department has moved to reassure tourists that drinking here is safe.
Certainly, I assure them they can have confidence in drinking in Thailand. We have regulations.
Experts say these cases are a reminder to stick to sealed drinks in reputable places.
This is directly contrary to the spirit of adventure, but this is what you need to do in places where there's not careful regulation of alcoholic beverages.
A timely warning as Australians prepare to travel to Southeast Asia in their droves. Lauren Day, ABC News, Bangkok.
Let's return to South Korea, which has made headlines across the globe after a botched attempt by the president to bring in martial law. While South Korea has been seen as a stable democracy in recent years, this week's events will be a painful reminder to some of the years of military rule and the brutal crackdowns on dissent. Lauren Beldy explains.
The last time martial law was declared in South Korea was in 1979, under the military dictatorship of Chun Do-hwan. He rose to power after the previous dictator, Park Chung-hee, was assassinated. Those tumultuous events led to the Gwangju Uprising in 1980, where protesters called for an end to the military junta. It was met with a brutal crackdown by the armed forces, helped by Army General and future President Roh Tae-woo.
The people of Gwangju protested for an end to the military junta and the removal of Chun Du-hwan. Chun and Ro called in the special forces and gave orders to kill and suppress the uprising.
The official death toll is around 200 people, but rights groups say it was much higher. The uprising left such a mark on the South Korean public that the anniversary would draw protests for years afterwards.
Chun Du-hwan and Roh Tae-woo both deserve the death penalty to vindicate those who died.
Pro-democracy protests in 1987 were more successful and ushered in the present-day democratic government of South Korea. But Yoon Suk Yeol's sudden, though short-lived, declaration of martial law is a reminder of a more oppressive time for many South Koreans. Now the unpopular leader faces impeachment.
Impeaching a president is not really a fun thing to do, not even for a lawmaker. But this person, Yoon Suk Yeol, has done something crazy that violates the constitution. He basically committed a coup d'etat. Impeachment is not a choice anymore, it's a must.
The only South Korean president to be successfully impeached was Park Geun-hye, daughter of the assassinated president from 1979. She was impeached in 2016, accused of corruption and abuse of power and sentenced to a lengthy prison term before a pardon by her successor in 2021. South Korean leaders are often investigated and prosecuted after they leave office, and President Yoon's leadership has been dogged by controversy, including an influence peddling scandal involving his wife. Beyond a possible impeachment, it's unclear if he might follow a well-worn path from the Blue House to a prison cell. Lauren Beldy, ABC News.
Folk and classical musician MaithiliThakur launched a career on reality TV singing competitions in India. Now she's got a huge following on social media. Her passion for singing in multiple languages brought her recognition as India's cultural ambassador for the year. This week she was in Melbourne to perform.
So I have been practicing classical music since I was 7. My grandfather, he introduced the folk music and devotional music to me. And then my father was very passionate. He's a music teacher, so he taught me also. He taught my brothers also, so we 3 siblings, we joined forces and we started practicing together. I sing and I play harmonium. A brother younger to me, he plays tabla, and the youngest one who has come with me to Melbourne, he sings also. He plays khol, mridangam and dholak, and he plays harmonium. So my youngest sibling is more talented than any of us. I never thought that I'll become a musician, and that too a professional musician. When I started to appear in different reality shows, that was like a challenge. I never thought I would go that far. I got rejected quite multiple times. I practiced more and appeared in 2017. That time I got some recognition and people started to notice me. And then I started my YouTube journey, and then after 1 year, my Instagram journey and Facebook journey. So it was all over. The social media stuff started to happen, and I was doing it like my full-time thing.
I'm a big follower of her, I must say. I think she brings the heart and soul of India in her music, a beautiful representation of what Indian culture is all about.
We have so many different languages in India, so I try to sing in different languages so that people of different states, they connect with me and my music, because I come from Bihar where only there are a few languages, like Maithili, it is my mother tongue, Bhojpuri, Magahi, Bajjika, Angika, these are few bolis which are used in Bihar, but I sing Gujarati, Punjabi, Bagheli, Bundelkhandi, Shabad Kirtan, Gadhwali, Kumaoni. I sing in many languages.
Maithili, namaste.
I got the Cultural Ambassador of the Year award from our Prime Minister, Modi ji, and that was a big thing for me. I am trying to hold that award very proudly and confidently. Nowadays, I'm really very focused towards folk and devotional music. It includes singing about Bhagwan, like it's a very religious and spiritual thing.
As I'm a student of Indian classical music, this is one of the artists I've been following from a long time. It's just not about her, it's about the language of the music.
We are her big fans.
So she sings really well traditional songs. That's what I like the most about her, yeah.
Traditional, devotional songs.
Hindi music? Yep.
So we like that.
Yeah.
And finally, American coffee chain Starbucks has opened a new branch in an unusual location at the heavily militarized North Korea border. People can now visit the cafe just outside of the demilitarized zone separating the two Koreas. Customers took pictures of their Starbucks mugs against the backdrop of North Korean territory after the official opening. The local mayor said he hopes the new cafe would entice more tourists to visit. And that is all the time we have. I'm Girish Sawlani. See you next time. Bye for now.